I resigned after 18 years in the family business, then watched it burn without me. I'm Ethan. I'm 38 now, but the story really starts 18 years ago when I joined the family business, Johnson and Brothers Plumbing. It was my dad's company, something he built from scratch back in the early 80s. My two uncles were involved early on, but eventually it was just my dad running the show. Growing up, I always knew I'd end up there in some capacity, but that didn't mean I was handed anything on a silver platter. After high school, I went to college and got a degree in business management. Could have pursued something more corporate, maybe even joined a bigger company in the city, but I believed in what my dad built. I saw potential. So when I came back, I started from the bottom. I mean literally, I was the guy unclogging toilets and crawling under houses for pipe inspections. The guys who'd been working there for years, most of them older than me, didn't cut me any slack either. I earned my spot. Over the next few years, I poured everything into that company. I revamped our client database, brought in a proper CRM system, set up digital invoicing, even started pushing some local SEO and social media ads before other small plumbing businesses in our area caught on. We were based just outside of Minneapolis, so there was enough competition to keep you on your toes, but also plenty of opportunity if you knew how to stand out. And we did. Within 3 years of me stepping into the operations and marketing side, without even holding the official title of manager yet, our profits jumped 60%. We went from a 5-man crew to a full team of 15. I hired a dispatcher, an in-house bookkeeper, and even negotiated a deal with a local hardware supplier that saved us thousands a quarter. I was proud. And I thought my dad was proud too. He'd mention me at job fairs and community chamber meetings, say how his son was the reason the business had grown so much lately. But that's the thing, I never wanted just recognition. I wanted a future with this business. I wanted to be part of its ownership, part of the vision. I wanted the long game. And I thought I was playing it. From year 5 to year 15, I became the go-to guy in the company. My dad was semi-retired by then, only showing up for some of the bigger contract bids or when something needed his signature. I ran everything: scheduling, payroll, hiring, vendor management, licensing, fleet maintenance. My name wasn't on the company paperwork yet, but everyone treated me like I was the boss. Customers called me directly, suppliers sent contracts to my email instead of his. In every practical sense, I was running Johnson and Brothers, except legally. And that turned out to be a problem, because for all the work I put in, all the years I gave up, I never got anything in writing. My dad would brush it off every time I brought it up. "Don't worry, Ethan. One day this'll all be yours." That was the phrase. Over and over. One day. Like it was some mythical future that would just arrive on its own, no paperwork required. Around year 16, I started pushing harder. I was nearly 36, had a wife, a mortgage, a daughter starting school. I needed stability. I wasn't asking for a full buyout or to kick my dad to the curb. I just wanted to become a co-owner, a partner. To have my name officially on the business I had spent nearly 2 decades building. That's when things started to change. The first red flag was subtle. My Uncle Terry, who'd been mostly out of the picture for years, suddenly started showing up again. He and my dad had a falling out way back, but now they were grabbing lunch, going on fishing trips together. I didn't think much of it at first. But then my dad started excluding me from client meetings he would have begged me to lead before. He started calling the shots again, but without consulting me. Then, one day, I came into the office and noticed the filing cabinet was locked. That cabinet had never been locked. It held the business tax files, incorporation documents, vendor contracts, everything. When I asked my dad about it, he said he was just being cautious, that too many people had access lately. No one else even had keys to that office besides him and me. A few weeks after that, our company accountant, Sandra, who had been with us for nearly 20 years, suddenly quit. She wouldn't give me a straight reason. Just said it was time for her to move on. That didn't sit right with me either. She and I had always gotten along. I trusted her more than most people in my life. The final blow came on a Tuesday morning. I walked into the office, and my login to the system was disabled. At first, I thought it was a glitch. I asked our admin to reset it, and she looked uncomfortable. She said, "I was told not to give you access anymore." I was stunned. I called my dad. He didn't answer. Called again. Then finally I got a text. "Meet me at the house. We need to talk." What followed was the most surreal conversation of my life. He sat me down at the kitchen table and said, "I've decided to bring Terry back in full-time. He's going to help run the company now." I asked what that meant for me, and he gave me the most gutless, corporate-sounding speech I've ever heard from my own father. "You've done great work, Ethan, but the business needs a fresh direction. You've had a good run." "A good run?" I stared at him, trying to wrap my head around what he was saying. "Are you firing me?" I asked. He didn't answer directly. He just said, "It's time for you to find your own path." That was it. 18 years. Gone. No contract. No ownership. No severance. Just a thanks and a goodbye. I walked out of that house without saying another word. Drove home in silence. My wife, Megan, knew something was wrong the second I walked in. When I told her what happened, she looked at me like I'd just told her a family member had died. And in a way, one had. The version of my dad I thought I knew died that day. I've spent the last 2 years rebuilding my life from scratch. Started my own plumbing company, EJ Mechanical. Not as flashy a name, but it's mine. It's slow going, but I've already picked up a few of our old clients. Word gets around. People ask why I left, and I just say, differences in direction. But the truth burns inside me every day. 18 years of loyalty. For nothing. So, after 18 years of giving everything to my family's company, only to be pushed out like I was a seasonal intern, I tried to make sense of what had changed. At first, I blamed it on my dad getting older, maybe thinking he needed to reconnect with old blood like Uncle Terry. But then came the real gut punch, my younger brother Brad. Brad was always the golden boy, even though he never earned that title a day in his life. He's 5 years younger than me, 33 now, and his entire adult life has basically been one long party with brief intermissions for overpriced brunch and influencer photoshoot. While I was in the trenches building our business from the ground up, Brad was out chasing Instagram fame. And to be fair, he kind of got it. He's one of those guys with a six-pack, flashy smile, and just enough charisma to sell protein powder or gym memberships to gullible teenagers. He had a decent following, sponsored posts, and enough engagement to land a few modeling gigs and brand partnership. My parents always acted like Brad was just taking time to find himself. But apparently, after over a decade of finding himself through beach parties, YouTube vlogs, and brand deals for things like teeth whitening strips and plant-based energy drinks, he decided he wanted to settle down. And by settle down, he meant getting a comfy job at the family business. I found out about it from an old coworker who texted me, "Dude, Brad's back. He's calling himself head of customer relations." What the hell? I thought it was a joke. Head of what? That position didn't even exist when I was running things. And customer relations? Brad couldn't manage a conversation without checking his phone halfway through. I didn't get it, until I realized this was never about business. This was about appearances. Turns out my dad had created a whole new title for Brad, head of customer relations, and was paying him a salary that was 90% of what I had been making when I left. Let that sink in. The guy with no business background, no industry knowledge, no work ethic, no certifications, and no experience was making nearly as much as the person who built the company's infrastructure from scratch. And while I had to claw my way up from the bottom rung, Brad strolled in wearing designer sneakers and got a corner office with his name on the door. The worst part? He wasn't doing anything. Literally nothing of substance. His job consisted of taking calls from clients, which he mostly avoided, attending meetings where he'd smile, nod, and contribute absolutely zero, and filming company TikToks that made the plumbers on the ground look like reality show side characters. He'd post videos like "A Day in the Life of a Plumbing Boss," while sipping cold brew in his air-conditioned office and claiming he was out here grinding. And my dad? Couldn't get enough of it. "Brad's bringing in a new generation," he'd say. "He's modernizing our image. Reaching the younger audience." He talked about engagement rates, follower counts, and viral views like that was now the core metric of the plumbing industry. Meanwhile, jobs were getting delayed, client complaints were piling up, and the technicians were pissed off because they had to redo sloppy work or clean up logistical messes Brad didn't understand, let alone fix. But every time something went remotely right, Brad got the credit. Clients sent a thank you email? That's Brad's influence. People love our new approach. New vendor partnership I'd been negotiating for months before I was shoved out? Brad helped close the deal with his charm. Hell, even a 5-star Google review from a longtime customer I had personally onboarded years ago was suddenly a testament to Brad's leadership. It didn't matter that he had no clue how to use the scheduling system, couldn't name a single model of water heater we serviced, and still referred to our techs as the plumbing guys, like they were hired contractors instead of full-time employees. In my dad's eyes, Brad was the savior of the business. The new face of Johnson and Brothers. I wanted to be mad. And I was. But more than that, I was exhausted. Exhausted from giving everything I had to a company that tossed me aside the second it became convenient. exhausted from watching a guy who used to skip Thanksgiving because of a music festival now get treated like he was the second coming of Steve Jobs for making Instagram stories about copper pipe. It was like a bad joke that just wouldn't end. And the worst part is, I don't even think Brad sees what he's doing as wrong. He genuinely believes he earned it. He thinks his vision and branding skills are revolutionizing the business, and any criticism is just jealousy. He even had the nerve to post a story one time with the caption, "Grind never stops." They laughed at first, now they ask how I did it. No, Brad. No one's asking that. They're just too stunned by the audacity to call you out. Anyway, I've kept quiet for the most part. Let them play their game. Let my dad pretend like he's found the future of the business in a guy who didn't know the difference between a flange and a faucet 6 months ago. But I've been working on something behind the scenes. So, after I got pushed out of Johnson & Brothers and my younger brother Brad waltzed in with his influencer charm and made-up job title, I was already feeling like I'd lost everything I'd built. What made things even worse, what took the knife in my back and twisted it, was what happened with Melissa. She was the new office manager. I still remember the first time I met her. I was walking in for a site check before I officially left the company, and she was at the front desk sorting through the absolute mess the last office admin had left behind. Her name tag was still temporary, and the inbox on her desk had been stacked with 2 months of unpaid invoices, scheduling conflicts, vendor issues, and customer service notes that hadn't even been returned. Most people would have run for the hills. Not Melissa. She was calm, focused, methodical. She had this way of speaking that made people actually stop and listen. Not loud or aggressive, but confident, like she didn't have to prove anything. She was only 32, but the way she took charge of the office operations was like she'd been doing it for 20 years. Within the first 2 weeks, she'd restructured the front desk, implemented a digital filing system, and completely streamlined our call response workflow. Even the techs, who usually rolled their eyes at new hires from upstairs, were impressed. And I was too. I didn't go in looking to catch feelings. My life was a disaster. I was picking up the pieces of my career, my reputation, and my sanity. But she was like this bright spot in the middle of the mess. At first, I just liked talking to her. She actually listened, asked thoughtful questions, got the difference between what I was trying to build at Johnson & Brothers and what Brad was turning it into. She made me feel like maybe I wasn't crazy for caring about doing things the right way. We started grabbing lunch together when I'd stop by the office, sometimes coffee. Then one Friday afternoon, after a long meeting where Brad kept interrupting and making dumb jokes during a vendor presentation, Melissa looked at me as we walked out and said, "You must have the patience of a saint. I don't know how you've dealt with that for so long." I laughed, but something changed in that moment. It wasn't just professional admiration anymore. There was something else there. Over the next couple of weeks, things got more personal. We started texting outside of work. Nothing romantic at first, just sharing frustrations about how disorganized everything had become. She told me about how she used to manage logistics for a chain of dental clinics before moving to town, how she was hoping to put down roots and find something stable. She mentioned her last relationship had ended because her ex couldn't handle how driven she was. I told her a bit about Megan and the divorce, how I was trying to rebuild after everything. It felt like something real was starting. Then Brad stepped in. It started subtle. I'd noticed Melissa laughing at something he said in the break room. Then she'd mentioned he'd asked her to help with his new branding strategy for the company. I tried to brush it off, told myself she was just being polite. But deep down, I knew how this story was going to go. Brad had a type, and it wasn't just about looks. It was about attention. He didn't like it when someone else was in the spotlight, especially if that someone was me. One Monday morning, I walked in to drop off some paperwork and saw Brad leaning on her desk, flashing that fake, media-trained smile he always used when he was trying to be charming. She was laughing, a little too hard at something I knew wasn't funny. When I caught her eye, she looked away. Later that day, I texted her to see if she wanted to grab a coffee. She replied, "Can't today. Brad and I are going to check out this new spot downtown after work. Maybe another time." And just like that, the air changed. Within a week, it was obvious. They were dating. Brad had posted a picture of them on his Instagram, one of those couple photos where everything looks perfect and filtered, captioned something like, "Building dreams together, one project at a time." My stomach dropped when I saw it. Not because she owed me anything, we weren't official, hadn't even kissed, but because I'd been vulnerable with her. I'd let my guard down, and she went straight to the one person in the company who'd spent his whole life tearing down everything I tried to build. What made it worse was that for a while, it looked like she really bought into it. Brad paraded her around at meetings, called her his partner in strategy, and even credited her for implementing changes I knew she and I had talked about weeks earlier, before they ever started dating. She got swept up in the spotlight, the praise, the illusion. And I couldn't blame her. Brad could be magnetic when he wanted to be. He had a way of making people feel like they were the center of his world, until he got bored. And of course he did. A few months in, Melissa started to fade from his feed. No more couple photos. No more inside jokes in the captions. At the office, people whispered about how Brad was going out more, showing up late, barely responding to her emails. Then one afternoon, I got a call from one of the senior technicians. "Hey man, I think Melissa's losing it. She's been crying in the break room for the last hour." I didn't go to her. I couldn't. I wanted to, but I knew it wasn't my place anymore. Still, I found out later what happened. Brad had ghosted her. Just stopped showing up one weekend. No explanation. No text. And a week later, he posted a photo from Miami with some fitness model tagged in the caption. Melissa tried to hold her head high after that, but she was different. She stopped staying late. Stopped organizing the meetings. Eventually, she put in her notice and left quietly. Didn't even tell me. I found out from HR 2 days before her last shift. I ran into her a couple months later at a coffee shop. She looked tired but calmer. We talked briefly, surface level, but before she left she said, "I should have listened to you. About him. About all of it." I nodded. Said nothing. Because what was there to say? By then, it was already too late. So after everything that had happened, the betrayal from my dad, the joke of a position my brother Brad walked into, and the whole disaster with Melissa, I should have known better than to expect anything good to come out of working at Johnson & Brothers. But even after all that, I stuck around. I don't know if it was pride, denial, or the hope that maybe, just maybe, I could still salvage something from the 18 years I had put into that company. Maybe it was the memory of what it used to be before Brad and social media metrics became more important than actual plumbing. Anyway, about 6 months after Melissa left and things started to go quiet again, my dad called me into his office. He was more formal than usual. Didn't look up from his paperwork when I walked in. Just said, "Ethan, you've been putting in a lot of hours lately. I want to recognize that." I didn't respond right away, mostly because I was trying to figure out what angle he was coming from. Then he handed me an envelope and said, "We're promoting you. Senior Operations Manager. Effective next week." At first, I didn't even know how to react. On paper, it sounded like a big deal. The title was a step up, sure. But when you've already been running every operational piece of a company for over a decade, a title change without ownership means nothing. Still, I played along. Said thanks. He nodded like he'd just handed me the keys to the kingdom and said, "Oh, and there's a bonus. We're upgrading your company truck." That got my attention. A few days later, I saw it parked in front of the building. A brand new Ford F-250 Platinum, fully loaded, dark gray, with chrome trim and black leather interior. This thing had every possible upgrade: tow package, massage seats, panoramic sunroof, the whole 9 yards. I looked it up later and saw the price tag, just north of $95,000. I stood there for a full minute, not touching it, just staring. It didn't feel real. Maybe this was it. Maybe my dad was finally acknowledging my work. Maybe after all the hell I'd been put through, after watching my brother screw up everything he touched and still get applauded for it, I was finally getting something back. I wish the story ended there. But of course, it didn't. About a week later, we had a family dinner. My dad wanted to celebrate all the good things happening. I should have known that meant trouble. The whole family was there. My mom, my aunts and uncles, even cousins I hadn't seen in years. And of course Brad. He walked in late, as usual, wearing a designer jacket and holding Melissa's hand like they were the new royal couple of the Midwest. I tried to stay civil. I kept to myself, chatted with my uncle about football, avoided eye contact with Melissa. But toward the end of dinner, my dad stood up, tapped his glass, and said he had an announcement. "Before dessert," he said, raising his glass higher, "I want to recognize 2 very special people. Brad and Melissa." The room got quiet. Melissa smiled awkwardly. Brad smirked like he already knew what was coming. "I'm proud to share," my dad continued, "that Brad and Melissa are officially engaged. And in celebration of this new chapter in their lives, I want to give them something special." At first, I thought maybe it would be a check. Maybe an offer to pay for the wedding. That's the kind of thing my dad would have done. But then he said it. "The new F-250 parked outside, it's theirs. A gift. For the next phase of their journey." My stomach dropped. I didn't say anything. Couldn't. I just sat there staring at my dad, who wouldn't even look me in the eye. My mom clapped. My aunt let out a dramatic, "Oh my God." Brad grinned like he'd just been knighted. Melissa looked down at her lap, probably because even she knew how wrong it was. I sat through another 15 minutes of forced smiles and polite applause, then quietly excused myself. I didn't make a scene. I didn't yell. I didn't flip the table or demand an explanation. I went home, opened my laptop, and typed out a short, direct email to my dad. Effective immediately, I resigned from Johnson and Brothers Plumbing. Do not contact me for transitional support. Any outstanding matters related to my role are now your responsibility. Ethan. I clicked send. Then I shut the laptop, poured myself a drink, and sat in silence. 18 years. That truck wasn't just a vehicle. It was a symbol of everything I'd earned, everything I'd sacrificed, just handed over to the same guy who had coasted his entire life on charm and excuses. And the woman who helped him humiliate me without even knowing it. When I hit send on my resignation email, I expected some kind of reaction. Maybe a call, maybe a message, maybe my dad trying to talk me down. But nothing came. Not that day. Not that week. Total silence. And for the first time in 18 years, I wasn't checking emails at midnight or fielding emergency texts about job sites and deliveries. I was out. Finally out. What I didn't expect was just how fast everything would start unraveling without me. It didn't take long. In fact, it was almost immediate. Within 2 weeks, I started getting messages. Not from my dad or Brad, of course, but from former coworkers, clients, and even vendors. The first one came from a supplier we'd worked with for over a decade. He said he'd been trying to reach the office about a missing payment and couldn't get a straight answer from anyone. He asked if I was still involved. I told him no. Then I got another message, this time from a commercial client we'd landed during my expansion phase, a property management company that handled over 30 apartment buildings in the metro area. They said the crew never showed up to replace the water heaters at one of their complexes and that no one had returned their calls. That job was worth over $20,000. Gone. Then came the online reviews. Johnson and Brothers had built a strong reputation over the years, and we worked hard to earn it. We had a 4.9-star rating across multiple platforms. I had personally responded to most of the negative reviews, followed up with customers, sent texts back out when necessary to make it right. But without me there, the damage started piling up fast. In just 1 month, that rating plummeted from 4.9 to 3.0 stars. Customers were complaining about missed appointments, texts showing up at the wrong addresses, and phone calls going unanswered for days. One review read, "Used to love this company. I don't know what happened, but it's a mess now. They scheduled me 3 times and canceled every time." Another one simply said, "Avoid. They've lost it." Inside the office, things were even worse. Brad, with his shiny Head of Customer Relations title, had no clue what he was doing. He spent most of his time trying to manage the company's Instagram page, posting motivational quotes over stock photos of pipe wrenches and calling himself a plumbing visionary. He had zero understanding of scheduling logistics, billing cycles, licensing deadlines, or even basic customer service. When clients called in with issues, he'd either pass them off to someone else or try to de-escalate by offering free services we couldn't afford to comp. Melissa, who had once been sharp and efficient, was now drowning. She was trying to do her actual job, pick up the operational slack, and cover for Brad's incompetence. She started coming in early, staying late, skipping lunch, and still couldn't keep up. Her emails became shorter, more clipped. I heard from one of the techs that she'd snapped during a staff meeting and walked out of the room crying. And then one of the office workers quit, a guy named Tim, who'd been there for 4 years. He was one of the few people who had survived the internal chaos for as long as I had. When he left, he didn't give 2 weeks. He just packed his things at lunch and walked out without saying goodbye. Jobs started falling through the cracks. The techs were showing up late, or to the wrong properties, or with the wrong parts. The dispatching system I'd set up and maintained for years had no one to update it properly. Billing was a mess. Contractors who once trusted us with long-term commercial work started pulling out. I heard through the grapevine that one of the city contracts we'd landed, installing backflow prevention systems, was cancelled mid-phase due to communication issues and unprofessional conduct. At first, my dad pretended everything was fine. He even made a post on the company's Facebook page about new leadership and exciting growth. But the comments told a different story. People were furious. "You lost our business forever. What happened to Ethan? He was the only reason we stayed with you. We called 3 times and never heard back." Eventually, they shut off the comments entirely. I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel a little satisfaction watching it all collapse. Not because I wanted anyone to suffer, but because it confirmed what I already knew, that I was the backbone of that company. That all the long hours, the sleepless nights, the weekends spent fixing things no one else even noticed, they all mattered. And once I was gone, so was the glue that held it all together. But I also felt sad. That company was my life's work. I'd given it everything I had. I didn't want to see it burn to the ground. I just wanted to be respected, treated like someone who mattered. In the end, Johnson and Brothers Plumbing didn't fall because of a competitor or a market shift. It collapsed because the people running it refused to see what was right in front of them. They chased image over substance. They bet on someone who never earned a damn thing, and they let go of the one person who had. After walking away from Johnson and Brothers, I wasn't sure what my next move was. 18 years in one company leaves a mark, and even though I was relieved to be free, I was also carrying a lot of doubt. I didn't know if anyone would take me seriously after what happened. I didn't have any ownership on paper, no official equity, no glowing recommendation from my father. All I had was experience and a reputation I hoped still meant something to the right people. A few weeks after my resignation, I got a call from a guy named Cliff, one of the regional managers at Henderson Mechanical and Heating. We'd crossed paths years ago when we both bid on a municipal contract. He said he heard I was no longer with Johnson and Brothers and asked if I wanted to grab lunch. I figured I had nothing to lose. We met at this quiet little diner just outside of town. He didn't waste time. He said Henderson was expanding, they needed someone who understood both fieldwork and operations, and he'd always respected how I ran things. He asked if I'd consider joining as director of field operations. I said I'd think about it. He smiled, shook my hand and said, "There's a truck waiting for you in the lot if you say yes." I walked outside and saw it. A Ford F-350 Super Duty Limited, company logo on the side, chrome grille, leather interior, fully loaded. It was the kind of truck you don't just hand someone lightly. It was a statement, a welcome, a recognition of value. I took the job. From day one, the difference was night and day. At Henderson, I wasn't treated like a disposable employee or a pawn in a family drama. I was respected, listened to, trusted. I was given real authority, real input in decisions. The team they had was solid, but they were missing some structure and long-term planning. That's where I came in. Within 6 months, I'd implemented scheduling protocols, streamlined equipment inventory, and improved client follow-up processes. Field guys started seeing the difference, and so did the partners. For the first time in years, I wasn't walking on eggshells or watching my back. I wasn't over-explaining every decision or trying to prove I belonged. I just did the work, and the results spoke for themselves. About a year and a half in, I got called into a meeting with the senior partners. I thought it was going to be a quarterly review or a leadership check-in. Instead, they offered me a partnership track. Not a vague, someday you'll get a piece speech like the one my dad dangled for years, but a formal offer with a clear timeline, equity terms, and legal documentation. I read through the packet in silence for a moment, then looked up and said, "You're serious?" The owner, George Henderson himself, nodded. "We don't offer this lightly, Ethan. You've earned it." That night, I went home and stared at the packet on my kitchen table for over an hour. Not because I doubted my decision, but because I couldn't believe it was real. All those years I spent begging to be taken seriously, all those nights trying to prove my worth to people who never really wanted me to succeed, and here I was, finally being seen for who I was. And around that same time, I met Lauren. She was an architect working on a commercial build that Henderson had been subcontracted for. We were introduced during a planning session. She was sharp, detail-oriented, and asked the kind of questions that made it clear she actually cared about the people who would be using the space, not just the design specs. After the meeting, she stopped me on the way out and said, "You're the first guy who actually gave me straight answers today. Let me buy you a coffee." That turned into dinner. Then another. We talked about everything: work, family, past relationships, mistakes, goals. She was 35, no kids, had been through her own version of career struggles. She wasn't interested in games or pretending. She was calm, grounded, and had this quiet confidence that made everything feel easier. Being around her didn't feel like work. It felt like breathing. We took it slow. No grand declarations, no drama. Just two people building something real, brick by brick. She didn't care about my past with the family business or the mess I'd come from. She cared about who I was showing up as now. And I liked who I was becoming with her. I'm not saying everything is perfect. Life never is. But for the first time in a long time, I'm in a place where I'm valued, both professionally and personally. I have a team that respects me, a partner who gets me, and a future I can actually see without dread. It happened on a random Saturday. Lauren and I had just finished brunch, and we decided to stop by a hardware store to pick up a few things for a backyard project we'd been working on. Nothing big, just some lighting for the new patio and a couple bags of mulch. We were in that relaxed weekend mood, laughing about how neither of us really knew what we were doing but were determined to make the space our own. I was loading a few items into the cart when I heard a familiar voice behind me. Loud, dramatic, and unmistakably Brad. At first, I didn't turn around. I thought maybe I was just imagining it. But then I heard Melissa's voice too, and I froze. I hadn't seen either of them in over a year. I glanced over my shoulder and sure enough, there they were, standing at the returns counter, clearly frustrated. Brad was red in the face, arguing with the employee about a part for a truck, and Melissa stood off to the side with her arms crossed, looking exhausted. I couldn't help but listen as Brad complained. "It's for the F-250. Platinum Edition. Look, the whole electrical system's fried. This part doesn't even fit. It's the third time this month I've been here, man." The guy behind the counter gave the kind of look you give someone who's been making your day worse for 20 minutes. Melissa sighed and rubbed her forehead like she'd had enough of this too. I could have walked away. I probably should have. But something made me push my cart down that same aisle. Maybe I wanted to see their faces. Maybe I just wanted them to see mine. As I approached, Melissa looked up first. Her eyes widened immediately, and she tapped Brad's arm. He turned around and his whole posture shifted. He looked like a kid caught stealing from the cookie jar. Melissa stepped forward, hesitantly. "Ethan," she said, trying to sound calm. "Wow, it's been a while." I nodded. "It has." She glanced at the cart, then at Lauren, who was just a few steps behind me, completely unfazed. I could tell Melissa noticed how relaxed I looked. How good things had clearly turned out for me. "I just wanted to say," she started, "about everything that happened. I was wrong. I didn't see it back then, but I do now. And I'm sorry. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't get dramatic. I just looked at her and said, that part of my life is done. I've moved on." Brad tried to jump in. "Man, it's not like that. The truck, my dad said it was for me, I didn't even." I cut him off without raising a brow. "You don't owe me an explanation. And I don't need one." I turned to Lauren, who gave me a small smile, then we started walking toward the checkout. I didn't look back, but I could feel the weight of their eyes following me. Later that evening, my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number right away, but I picked it up anyway. It was my mom. Her voice was soft, almost fragile. "Ethan, honey, can we talk?" I didn't say anything right away. Just let her speak. "I know things went badly. I know we made mistakes. But your father's not doing well, and Brad's not handling the business. We miss you. Maybe you could come by the house on Sunday. Just to talk. Please." I looked out the window at the backyard Lauren and I had been working on. The new lights were already up. The fire pit was ready. I could hear her inside, laughing at something on the TV. I took a deep breath and said, "I appreciate the call. I really do. But every Sunday, I'm busy for years to come." There was a long pause on the other end. Then she whispered, "I understand." We hung up and that was that.